All right, so let's talk about font size and leading. Font size deals with the overall height of your text. And as such, there are some rules for how small or large you can go, and oftentimes that is dependent upon the medium or the printer or publisher guidelines that are given to you. And to adjust the size of your points, simply select your text box, come over to your properties panel. You want to come over here and scroll down to your character area, and you'll find your font size right here. Right now, this particular font is 20 points. And to adjust it, you can always click on the arrow to increase the size of it, click the down arrow to decrease. You can also use the drop down for presets, or you can always type it in. It's that easy. Let's make that 24. Okay, and I'll drop it back to 20. The next item is leading. Leading controls the space between lines of text. This space is needed because it aids in reading, as the proper amount of white space is easier on the eyes. Now, most publishing software will assign a default value based on the size of your text selected. For a designer, most of the times you will want to adjust it, as it may not be enough. So for example, with this text box selected, we come back over to our properties panel, we scroll down to our character. This is the font size, here's the leading. Our font size is at 20, and the default leading that the software assigns is 24 points. Now, what I normally look for when it comes to leading is I usually adjust mine to be 4 to 8 points larger than the actual point size given. So let's see what that'll look like. I'm going to select this text box over here, and we'll adjust it as a comparison. So right now it's already at 4 points, which is the lowest point on our range. So let's take it up by adding 6 points to the font size. Let's try 26. Okay. Again, just a little bit of space adds a little bit more readability to our lines of text, and that doesn't look too bad. Let's select it again, and this time, scroll down. Let's try 28 points. Again, not too bad compared to the original. A little bit more breathability, maybe just a little bit too much, so I might reduce that back down to 26. But you can see how just a small change in the size of that leading increases the readability and the visual aesthetics of that actual text. Now, what you have to be careful of is to make sure that your leading isn't so tight that you have too little white space. So for example, let's reduce that down to, let's do 18. Let's go the opposite direction. Again, notice how more difficult that is to read now compared to the original text. So that's too tight of a leading. Your other danger is if you have too much. So let's do 40. It starts to look like a children's book. Now notice how this affects your ability to read this text. As you get to the end of the line, you have a large amount of white space, which means the eye actually has to work harder to come down to the next line of space. This gap, the larger it increases, causes a visual pause to reading. So instead of it reading fluidly, over here, when you get to the end of the line, there's a slight visual pause. You come down to the next line, read it, slight visual pause, go to the next line, and so on. So if you have too much leading, you actually affect readability in a negative way. And what I often tell most students is that the moment that the focus shifts from this being a paragraph to being individual lines of text, you've gone too far in your leading. So again, my rule of thumb is that I usually stick to about 4 to 8 points larger than the actual font size. And that seems to work out pretty well. And again, that can always change depending upon your actual font. Something to keep in mind.